Hello, hello. Welcome to Mortality and Tea. Not that that's the song I'm going to use for the show. Welcome to Mortality and Tea. Um, there's something showing up on my computer. One moment, please. I don't know. Anyway, hello. Welcome to Mortality and Tea with Amy. I'm Amy. I have a cup of coffee. I have a cup of coffee today. I drink tea, but not every day. I could probably drink more tea, but I don't. I love my coffee. So, but cheers to whoever's showing up for this little show that I tell you, it's probably more of just a cathartic thing for me that I'm a person of the spoken word. It's how I can write. I enjoy writing, but I'm also really I I can get going when I talk. And so it feels good. It's cathartic. It helps me get it out. I've got my Ram Dass shirt on today. We're all just walking each other home. That's I'm a Ram Dass fan, so you might hear me talk about uh, him and his path and his journey. It's inspired mine a lot. And he too was, I don't think that the term was there, but I would consider him to have been a death doula uh, per listening to his stories and his journey. Um, and I did not know this of him until after I'd become a death doula. So it was kind of a lot of our stories, his stories kind of mirrored a bit of mine, and it helped me feel a lot more comfortable in this world. It's always nice to find people when we know we're not alone, you know. Anyway, I've got my hat on today. It's freaking cold here in Michigan. Freaking cold. It's warmer than it was the other day. The other day, I think most of the nation was feeling this chill in the air, but we've got a good amount of snow on the ground. Holy crap. And I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Um, for me, I know there's a lot of people out there that snowy weather and the gray skies here in Michigan can really get a lot of people down and need to take those vitamin D supplements to help boost the system. For me, I love it. Anyway, but welcome to Mortality and Tea. Me, your host, Amy. The place where we contemplate our own mortality, our own death, in order to find a more rich and juicy life. And rich and juicy. It just came to my head too that sometimes that juicy is if you don't like tomato juice and you get tomato juice, that's what you got for the day. Sometimes you get a little bit of a cranberry juice. Perhaps you like cranberry juice. Soothing. Perhaps you get guava juice, juice of the gods, so I hear. Funny story about guava juice. When I was little, there was a family that lived down the street, and they weren't quite a family yet. Uh, it was a husband and wife. They were young. They seemed older to me because I was just a little kid, and they moved in down the street. Sorry, my husband is texting. They moved in down the street from us, and we just fell in love with them as little kids, me and my two sisters. And we spent they were so warm and welcoming and gracious, and we spent a lot of time just going down to their house and knocking on the door. It was Karen and Jim. They were just so sweet. Of course, we were young, so we called them Mr. and Mrs. and by their last name. And we had so much fun. We'd go down there and they'd play games with us and entertain us and make us food. And Karen always had guava juice in her little cabinet. I can still see the cabinet in their little kitchen. We loved their house and we loved going down there to visit them. And I loved getting the guava juice out. They also had V8 juice. This is funny. This is all coming. I was like, why did I pick tomato juice and guava juice? Well, there it is. There it is from my my little house on Little Forest Drive growing up, and drinking guava juice and tomato juice, and now I'm here drinking coffee. So um, that was me as a little kid drinking guava juice. But so sometimes in our rich and juicy life, uh, I don't ever want to paint a picture that when we contemplate our mortality, um, we find a happy life. Um, for me, that was a goal, uh, but the rich and juicy is more of an ode to a free life. Rich and juicy is in taking in all those bits of life and using them as grist for the mill. It's a good fodder for growth and freedom to be ourselves, freedom to be exactly who we are, and finding that self acceptance, um, that self acceptance, that compassion for the self, love for the self. Um, and when I say compassion and love for the self, it's for me the way I've found it. It's a compassion and love for the humanity of who I am. Being a perfectionist, I have yet to find out how to be perfect. In fact, it's breaking that down, which is brings me closer and closer every day to a rich and juicy life. That um, being perfect was the goal for a long period of time, and then to break that down has been the way of finding the rich and juicy life. Recognizing and loving every bit of my human condition, which there's a culture around me, and of my family of origin that I came from, with no fault of their own. I don't blame anybody. I don't blame anybody. The world is the world, and it's the way it is. The design is perfect, just the way it is, according to my own beliefs. That um, the design of even all my neurotic parts, all of my perfectionist, all of my anxiousness and depression and self pity and and joy and laughter, uh, um, my judgments, my critic, my shame, all of it, um, all the feelings I have, everything, every bit of who I am in that human condition is for me learning to love all of that, and finding grace in that human condition has led me to a lot more enlightenment. I would not say I'm enlightened. I would say I wouldn't even say that's the goal. It has been. There's times that I want that where my brain's like, our goal is to become enlightened and to find nirvana. And any of my Buddhist friends out there, people who practice meditation or anything like that, that's your goal. Maybe need to go back and reconsider or learn a little bit more or whatever, you know. But by no means, I do not know everything about any of that. I'm just a student of life, and I've read as much as I can about different religions, and I take them with me, what works and what doesn't work for me. If it doesn't work, I don't need to use it. Maybe it'll be a tool for later. If it does work, I bring it in, use it, apply it. Um, But so that is that. So, but I did want to step into why or my own journey with exploring my mortality, my own death, as to why I'm here. And so I'll get a little bit more comfortable as I am sitting on the floor. I might fidget a lot because that's just what I do. um, so years ago, 11 years ago, going on 12, 11 years ago, my dad passed. And when he passed, um, let me drop in for a second. When my dad passed, I'm dropping in. When my dad passed, it was in October, October 4th, 2013. Um, I went down, which is my normal path. It's my normal. When things get really rough, I went into drinking and smoking a lot of marijuana and imbibing and and substances. I'm in recovery from substance abuse disorder. Um, and so um but I'd made a choice to start coming away from that. Um, it was not an easy choice for me. For me, I grew up in a family where there was a lot of drinking and substance abuse that was fairly hidden, but I knew about it. And so uh, it just, it was how my family, how they dealt with things. So when my twin sister died, that was my pattern. I noticed it was also the pattern of my family, and and that stuff's passed on from generation to generation. Now I've been clean for a while and I'm proud of it. Um, but so there I was after my dad died, and I was really, after my twin died, I went through an awakening of sorts, as much as a teenager could go through something like that. Um, because I the way I feel and believe is that an awakening is also an awakening to your ego. And as a young person, teenager and young adult, the ego isn't necessarily fully formed. It's still forming, it's still shaping, I'm still becoming somebody, and then later becoming nobody, which is awakening and exploring who you really are and what you've built over the years. And it can be a shock. It can be shocking to some people, maybe not so much, but for me, it was shocking. Um, but so yeah, when dad died, a new awakening had occurred, was occurring. Um, I got to know my dad better after he passed. He was a very quiet man. He was very sweet. He was very kind. He didn't talk much. It pissed me off when he died. I remember saying, "God, you didn't say anything. You didn't give me anything." It was just a lot of high expectations and whoops, a lot of high expectations and um not much advice. Even if I asked for it, it wasn't necessarily available. He was quiet, And that I used to say when he passed away that his silence was deafening. Like, I really needed more. And because I didn't know how to go through this grieving process. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I didn't know how to do it. And left and right, people were handing me substances to get through, fully knowing that I did struggle with substances, but that was what they knew as well. I mean, and the nature of the disease is shame and blame and shift things and control and sweep things around and avoid and not face much of anything. So when he passed away, I felt very angry. I didn't have support in the way that I needed it. I had support in the way that people knew how to give. Um, I also didn't know how to receive support. So there's a double-edged sword there, if you will, quite a paradox, hey? Um, but so I was really seeking very hard for wisdoms. I didn't know where to get them. And at one point, um, I would sit on our little patio porch that we had in our backyard where my little girls would play in the backyard, and we had built some gardens back there. It was really pretty, and I was homeschooling that year. Um, and I would sit out there for hours, hours. This was going into the second year of my dad's death. So I'd gone through a period of grief and post trauma. This was a death where he had fallen 3 stories off of the back of the house. And I had arrived with him and my mom after he had fallen, very shortly after it. I only lived about 7 minutes away, so I got there before the ambulance arrived. I was arriving when the ambulance arrived, so I was running down the driveway. This is a story. It's hard for me. I was running down the driveway to him, and I held his hand. He was actively dying, and it wasn't pretty. There was a lot of blood, and his body was dying. There was a lot of sounds of gurgling in the chest with his lungs filling with blood. He was struggling. He was not awake. He wasn't there. He wasn't conscious. He wasn't aware. The moment you witnessed right there, that was about where I lived for 2 years. Just in the accident for 2 years. Oh, bless it. Every time I think about that, I think about my 2 little girls and how they had a mom who was trying so very hard and so very lost and so very numb. Mm, I love my baby girls so much. Anyway, I love them. So post trauma, it was hard. Um, I sat there for 2 years sitting on that porch, or for a year sitting on that porch, not quite a year, it was a summer, after I'd built these little gardens and watched my little girls, my babies play in the backyard and, um, with a present but not so present mama. But I just watched. I was so craving wisdom, so craving understanding, so craving for answers. I was terrified. If God could take my twin sister in a horrid way too, at least it felt like for me, she had died in a car accident. And I was present for that one as well. I wasn't in the car accident, but I was there. And that experience, it was awful. I had a very I'm not gonna go into that one right now. This one is enough. Um, I should put a trigger warning on this video. The paths I traveled with both of those griefs was very similar. It's my patterns. Um, but in this one, I was really craving. I needed to know how to do this. And I needed to give my girls something because I all I knew and all that I was handed was to suffer alone and to drink and to take prescriptions and to smoke. That's what I knew. That's what I witnessed. That's what I observed. And that's what I knew. And it wasn't working. It wasn't working. And I was terrified. I was like, I have these two little girls that are looking at me as a parent in their life as to how do I do this? What do I do? And I knew one day they're going to lose me. One day they will lose me. Hopefully, hopefully one day. I've seen what happens to parents when they lose a child. It's my heart goes out to any parent that has lost a child. Losing a parent or a sibling is difficult. Losing a twin, it's like losing a limb. It's like losing half of my body. But losing a child, it's like losing yourself. Is all I could understand by watching my own family go through it, my parents. So I felt desperate for something to give my girls on how do you grieve? In a culture that shoves away the pain and the sorrow, pushes it away. People telling you, "Oh, you just have to move on." The things that people would say to help me in my grief as much as they thought they were helping, it was awful. I know that they meant well. I am not judging. There's no judgment here. I feel angry that that is sometimes the design of what was coming up at the time for me, um, which was one of the reasons why I chose to do grief and death work. Was my God, this is madness in our culture. Is madness, and I lost a lot of friends partially because of the substance abuse. There's a lot that comes up and amplifies. I'm attention deficit disorder. Uh, Not I am, but my brain operates that way. I, um, I have depression. I, I suffer depression. I suffer anxiety. So if you're going to add substances to it, you are going to heighten those babies right up. They're going to be so fucking present. Forget about it. And so when you have all of those things so heightened and present, it's hard to be around somebody like that. Hell, fuck. Let alone they're grieving and they're suffering immensely. So I felt incredibly lonely and I felt like I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And I felt like I had to find out the answers right now, right here, because my kids were watching. And my mom, bless her heart, after the years of my twin dying, she really, she really did give me the tools that she knew, 'cause she was screaming. It was hard to watch her suffer so much, of so many people telling her what to do in her grieving process. It was hard to watch. And I remember her just kind of getting angry and being like, just let me do it. Just let me feel it. Just let me have this. Just let me have it. Um, and how much people would invalidate the experience. God has a purpose. This too shall pass. God just really wanted your girl. Fuck God then. You know what I mean? Fuck God. If God really wants my fucking daughter, per my mom's voice, fuck God. And she did. She was pissed. And I don't blame her. Not even for a second. That would be horrible to hear somebody say that to me about my own child. I it would take a lot of restraint for me not to want to punch the person, even though it's not them. I get it, but like, no. If that's the kind of God that this world wants to give me, fuck it. Then I'm out. And for me, when dad died, I started on that. I was pissed. I was so angry. I felt so angry. I felt terrified. I felt that if God could take my twin sister that way in a horrid accident, and if God could take my dad that way in a horrible accident, what else was going to happen? This is when anxiety shows up, like you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And in this case, I was like, everybody's going to die horrid ways, and I'm going to be there to witness it. This is what the world is telling me right now. I was pissed. I was so pissed. I became so hovering of a mother over my children. And I don't like the word, I don't like the term selfish because it has a connotation of judgment. And I like to live in a world free of judgment for me, my world, my mind. Um, so when I say that I was selfish, I didn't want anything to happen to my kids because I didn't want to experience that pain. And I robbed them of a bit of their life and their own freedom because of my own fears. And so when I say selfish, it's more of like a transfer of fear onto, and it did take something from them. And I recognize it, and I'm sorry for it. I and then there's where I have to look at my own humanity, that own part of me that wanted to protect myself, to show up in that way. That's human. It's not to be judged, it's to be understood. It's to be loved and say, I see why you showed up to protect me. That's the world I felt like I lived in. It got very scary there for a while. Very scary. Very scary. And I had to have these answers for my little girls. So I sat on my porch for days. I was smoking copious amounts of marijuana, which I do not recommend. Or that was my process, and um, it's not all for me. It wasn't all bad for me. The marijuana was a calming and soothing agent at the time for me. It was a bit of an ally for my body and my mind. The plant medicine, I truly believe in plant medicines, and so I believe that the plant medicine was working on me heavily. My intentions were set. I was trying to make a relationship with God, Great Spirit. However, sometimes I call it Great Spirit, sometimes I call it God, but it is for me that ever present being that has always whispered to my heart how much I am loved and how much I am a child of God, and that the words in my culture aren't real to God's love. God's always whispered on my heart, even at my hardest days, even on the days when I was s- self loathing and beating myself up and abusing substances. God was like, I love you so much. I hope you know that. Always there. Always was the voice. That's always been the voice. Even when I was challenging God, like, fuck you, God. Fuck you. Mm. That's how I felt. It wasn't even just a one, it was a double. Fuck you, motherfucker. You have fucked up my life. No. No, God loved me through it all. I live on this planet, on earth, in this human condition, and this design is here not to hurt me. It is a design that is there to show me grace and love, compassion and empathy that I couldn't get if I was living in heaven. Heaven has no growth. Heaven for me is just stagnation. There's a show that I watched called Arcane, and if you ever get a chance to watch it, it's incredible. And that show, it hits on that topic of that if you're trying to reach a perfect world and a heaven, if you will, um, there's no growth, it's stagnation. And without growth and with stagnation, that is real death. That is real death. Thich Nhat Hanh says that I remember hearing him say that if he was uh, for his students, he would not send them to heaven if the Christian heaven was real, because there'd be no growth. That's part of my own Buddhist belief is that, we have the lotus flower underneath is the muck, our humanity, our stories that bring us growth and that bring us to an awakening, looking at our own egos and how we show up in the world and how we move and operate and our patterns and our triggers and all of that and all this programming that's in here. I get to look at it, get to know it, get to play in it, get to suffer in it. And that suffering brings me more growth and more juiciness of a life. Ugh. Ugh. I'm going to cheers to that right now. If you have a cup of tea, cheers with me. Coffee. Anyway, so there I was sitting on my porch. I keep coming back to this. I was sitting on my porch and I had that hummingbird feeder up, and hummingbirds and wasps. I don't understand this concept of a spirit animal, but if you asked me what my spirit animal is, I would tell you it's the hummingbird and the wasp. I sat there that summer, and as much as I was suffering so much in my grief and in my pain, I was it was a very joyful time period for me. I watched those hummingbirds just come to the bird feeder. I watched the wasps come. We had a retaining wall, and the retaining wall would spill mud. And the wasps, I was sitting right next to the retaining wall, and the wasps would be very, very close to me, next to my feet. And I was just very silent, very still, not intentionally, just meditating, but didn't quite understand that that's what I was doing. And I'd watch those wasps dig up the mud and pull it in and go fly away with it. Now they flew up and over the neighbor's house and then they'd come back. And I watched this all summer and I knew that they were building their wasp nest somewhere with that mud. And the nature of them, how they moved, how they showed up, how they worked, their purpose, their beauty. I could not put into words what I learned. I don't I my words wouldn't do it justice what I learned, except for one small sentence, and I it reminds me of the Tao and about a bit of I can understand a bit of what Buddha underneath the Bodhi tree, and he put his finger down on the ground and he understood. I had a moment like that. It was like just not even just a small moment. It developed over time, but where it was, I really knew in my bones, in my soul, in my heart of hearts, I felt it. The that it's all connected. It's all one. All of it. Everything. How God was woven into the fabric of everything. Everything. I understood and I've not lost it. I've understood the concept of the I am, the I am. Who am I? I don't know, but I am. That beneath the mind, beneath the chatter of the brain, that resting in that space of watching the brain, there it is, there it is, the connection to everything, the witness, the all, the Tao. I just knew it was all connected. I knew it was all connected. I started to feel my humanity in that way. I wanted to grow my armpit hair. I wanted to, what the hell is it like to be a freaking human being? I've been shaving all this shit, covering it up with makeup, doing all this crazy stuff. Like, what is this capable of? Like, I was like so fucking curious. Pissed my husband off. I love you, honey. I know you put up with so much being married to me. Oh, I fall in love with my husband more and more every day. He has put up with so much shit. I'll hug and kiss you, honey, later. Um, I was really in it. I tell you what, I was in it. I fell in love with the world for a moment. I I saw it all. I saw that even the walls were woven with the fabric of God, of Great Spirit. That it all was here and it all belonged. And I was trying to find people that might have understood what I understood because I felt really scared and alone in that knowing, that understanding. And I wasn't finding people. I would find some Christians who batted it away. Like, no, like really? Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll go somewhere else and find it. Found my way into some Buddhist practices, which I started to understand. One of them was too, I was really lost. And so, in this awakening and how incredible it can be, was also a madness, if you will. Like, what the fuck? It's like waking up from a dream. You're like, what the fuck is happening? And my dear friend, oh, I love her so much, my friend Phoenix. She lived in Austin, Texas at the time. And my husband, I told him, I was like, I gotta go. I gotta go see her. I gotta figure out what the fuck is happening to me. And he bought me a plane ticket. I shipped off to Austin, Texas, and spent a week with my sister, Phoenix. And I'll never forget, I was like, I don't know. I told her this story. I said, I don't know what's happening to me. I don't understand. She goes, it's called awakening. And I was like, what? Just hearing the term, I felt so validated, so seen, so understood of what I was going through because I wasn't finding it anywhere else. I was finding people kind of just looking at me funny and kind of weird, and I was like, "What? Am I crazy?" Like, "No, you're not crazy, girl." A lot of people go through this. A lot of people. I started to find my people. But Phoenix was so good with me. I remember showing up at her place in Austin, Texas, and she had I had never experienced that kind of care and love before. Um, Maybe I was just more open to it, more able to receive it. She had like she had given me her camper to stay in for the week, and she'd smudged it with sage, and she put little things all over the camper. Um, Little flowers, little things, just little things that made me feel so comforted and seen and valued and just took good care of me. If you see somebody going through an awakening, just go take care of them. It's it's an intense process, I'm telling you what. So that process, we ended up so I went through my awakening, that part of it. And I've had a journey ever since then, just trying to figure out what the fuck I'm doing. And when I find out, it'll probably be the day I die. Um, it led us to moving. I was following spirit. I was understanding that it was time to go for many reasons. Time to leave Michigan, or time to leave Ohio, move to Michigan. We're in Michigan now. Um, and I'm grateful that my my husband came. He followed. I was follow my madness. um, we ended up in Michigan, and we did. We followed spirit. I still get homesick for Ohio. I still miss it. I still love everybody there. But this has been an incredible journey. Living in Michigan, I found uh, a place where we're right close to the lake. We're only a few minutes away from Lake Michigan, which is absolutely beautiful. And the water here it's fresh water. The beaches are made of quartz sand. It is like for people who are in a spiritual way or follow like they like crystals and sage smoke and all of that stuff. This is a place I'm going to tell you, it's incredible. Um, and maybe if you don't have all those kinds of things in your practice or part of your craft, uh, I don't think it's deniable that I don't think anybody could deny that it's a really soothing place here. Um, that being said, the madness that I was in, and we moved up here, and I was off and on trying to quit smoking and drinking and finding finding where I could quit, but I couldn't stay quit. I couldn't not come back to drinking and smoking. And when we moved up here, so we've uprooted, picked up the family, uprooted everybody, brought us into this new place, caught a little bit by my cousin John and his wife Sarah, who I absolutely love dearly. And we started to get settled. And I was really struggling. So now we've moved. And I was really starting to struggle mentally. And of course, right? Like when moving, it's another death. And so according to my own uh, traditions of how I follow Great Spirit, how I understand the world, and my own readings of different um, religious practices and understandings of God and the world, is that we have many, many, many deaths, lives, and death, rebirth, and life, and then death and rebirth and life. And when we moved up here, it was a death. We said goodbye to our old home, our old neighborhood, our old friends. I mean, we didn't say goodbye to them fully. I mean, we still see a lot of our friends, but not that life. It's not the same. It's not like picking up on a Friday night and going to stay the night at my friend Mike and Jenny's with my family, and our family's getting along. It wasn't happening anymore. Um, there was a death. Just like if a child moves out of the house, it's a death. The stuff shifts. There's a change. There's a falling away, a goodbye to a part of your life. And there's a lot of deaths and rebirths and livings. And so coming here was a death, and I wasn't treating it as so. I treated it as if it was a grass is greener on the other side, and I'm going to find the life of happiness. That's what I thought. And I think we know how that story goes. Like, if the grass is greener on the other side and you think that you're going to have a happier life over there, you are wrong. You are wrong. If anybody has figured that out, please raise your hand and tell me, or make a comment, whatever. Really, because I have yet to find anybody that's found it that way. I mean, I've certainly found something on the other side. The grass wasn't greener. I brought all of my troubles and all of my worries and all of my shit with me, all in this body, all in here. And so within about a year of moving up here, I really needed support, and more than my husband could give, more than my friends from far away could give, and more than probably my cousin and his wife could give. It just I was really struggling, uh, and so I found myself in a therapist's office. I went to my family doctor that we had met when we came up here. Loved him, love him still. Pray for him. We'll know when I pray for him in just a minute. His wife was a therapist, and I went to him and I was like, I am not okay. I've never been suicidal. I'm a fight or flight. So my flight even is I want out of this life, but I don't want to die. I just don't want to be here. That's what happens in my brain when I get to like a real heightened state. I just want to be gone. I have dreamt of going in to become a Buddhist nun, be like, I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to leave. That's where I'm going to go. That's where I can find peace and serenity. I'm a peacemaker. So, so, I ended up in this therapist office, and I was reading a book called The Warrior Goddess. I cannot remember her name who wrote it. Heather Ashamera. Ah, great book, by the way. For me, it was great. If you're looking for something that's and that warrior goddess is exactly what it sounds like. It's about a very natural approach. Natural when I say, like pounding drums, lighting sage, um, that kind of stuff. I loved it. I still love it. I go back and I look at it quite frequently. Might even again. It's a nice thing to return to for somebody that definitely needs to identify and maybe strengthen their personal persona of themselves. Is maybe for me, I needed to feel like a warrior goddess because I really felt broken. I felt really broken, and I needed to feel whole. And so that was something that was really calling to me. So I ended up in this therapist office, and I was telling her a story. So in the book, I was supposed to come up with 5 women who inspire me in my life. And I'm going to be very candid on this show. So my intention is never to hurt anybody. Um, but I have to feel free. And for me, feeling free is telling my story. And I will do my best never to say too many names or throw anybody under a bus. But secrets keep me sick, and I can't have secrets. So, but I definitely won't. I'll try very hard not to hurt people in my process. So, but I was surprised that my mom was not on the list of 5 people that I admire and that inspire me. As a matter of fact, what I found was that she was probably pretty low on the list. Um, and it shook me. it shook me because I wanted her to be at the top of the list. I think a lot of us probably do. We want to put our parents up there, and we just don't understand why. Later finding out that, being in a dysfunctional family, it's when there's a lot of shame and blame going on, it's a false lifting. It's an egoic lifting. When we want to put people on a pedestal, it probably is a little bit not for me, for them. And I had a story that shook me, and it was, I just remember sitting in a therapist office when I was probably about 19 years old, and had told my mom about some sexual abuse that I had gone through. And she was pissed. She was mad. I don't know what was going on with her. I think there was some competitive nature, um, in her with other people. She was embarrassed that that would happen underneath her roof. Maybe she knew about it, maybe she didn't. Maybe she knew about it and didn't do something about it, and she was embarrassed that she was busted. I don't know. I don't know what was going on inside of her, but when she found out, she wasn't mad that it happened to me, she was mad at me. And it's taken me a long time to get to a place where I feel a lot of grace and compassion for her in that moment, because I was very angry for a very long time, looking back on it, because I carried that as if maybe I made up the story, maybe it didn't really happen to me, maybe I'm bad, maybe it was my fault. Oh, that's the worst. Maybe it was my fault. And she was mad, and she shook her foot the whole time in the therapist office. She just shaking her foot. You know how when somebody's legs are crossed and she's just shaking her foot. That's all I remember. And in the drive home, she didn't say a word to me. And I went back to college that night. I must have been 18. I was 18. I went back to college that night and got really drunk. Ended up with a boyfriend who beat me up. Not that night, but he was not nice to me that night either. And, my parents were angry that I said it. They My dad was even angry at me. Um, I wanna take little teenage me and give and just hold her so tight and say, "It's not your fault that happened to you. You deserved to be held and loved in that moment." My own parents' human condition and their humanity, I hold an incredible amount of grace for, and I hold an incredible amount of compassion and love. I do not excuse their behavior, but I do recognize that for whatever reason, they could not be what I needed them to be in that moment. And it was a core moment for me that I had pushed away for a very long time. What little 18-year-old me needed was held, listened to, taken to get some help, because I was doing drugs and stuff too. It was a mess. I needed help, and I was told I was ruining the family. Oh, it's just not true. I just hold little 18-year-old me and say, "It's just not true. You didn't ruin anything." And I feel for my parents that for however they were raised, they weren't raised to be held and cuddled in their most horrible times either. Otherwise, they would have known how to give it to me, you know? But they didn't. They didn't. I never went back to that therapist. My parents never took me back to that therapist either. We stopped seeing that therapist. That's how much they just wanted to sweep it away. They couldn't look at their own mistakes and their own humanity. They had to have that level of perfection that said we're the perfect family. I hate that for them. They missed out on a lot. Anyway, so I ended up with this therapist and I told her this story. And oh man, this must have been the second visit with this therapist. And I won't say her name because uh, she's not a good therapist. But she told me to go home and look up mothers who invalidate their daughters. And what I read shook my foundation, held up a mirror to me in some ways. It described what it's like to be in an alcoholic family. It described what it's like to have a mother who invalidates your experiences. It describes what it's like to live in a dysfunctional family. I don't know if I just said that. Alcoholic and dysfunctional. And the effects that it has. It described I went down a rabbit hole. For me, I am a person, I have my master's degree, so I will research. I will research and I will research and I will go and I will go and I won't stop until I get answers. And that's been a pattern, right? Like me sitting in meditation. What the fuck is the meaning of grief and living in life? I want to know. I want to know. I'll keep going. I'll keep going. And I went and I went. And I don't recommend anybody go down that rabbit hole. Uh, and then how that therapist treated me from that point forward, because I had a very serious mental reaction to that information being handed to me. I was shaking for days, for weeks. I couldn't sleep at night. I would just lay awake sweating. I looked at my kids. I thought I was a mother who was invalidating her own children as well, because it held up a mirror. The way this therapist handled my case was horrid. There's so many ways a therapist is supposed to gain trust, is supposed to get to know you, see how fragile your ego is at first. I was ready to do a lot of work. And then after that moment, I was terrified and I shut off. I think I dissociated. I mean, I don't want to I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but I think I heavily dissociated from myself. I even closed the door on the past. I couldn't even look at the past at being a mom. Like talking about my little babies running around in the garden and playing. A couple years ago, I couldn't even talk about it without having a few days of just torturous anxiety. This doctor, or yeah, she was a doctor. Um, she then proceeded, because I kept going back to her because at this point now I feel dependent on her, like she has all the right answers and I am fucked. I am a piece of shit. And she didn't backpedal. She didn't say, "Okay, hang on a second. Let's go back and look at what you read. Let's find out what's going on." She didn't try to recover the situation at all. As a matter of fact, it turned into, because then I said, "I listen, I'm understanding now. I got very vulnerable and said, I am an alcoholic. I see it now. I knew it before, and now I definitely know it." And I think she had a family member, a parent who was an alcoholic, and I think she took it out on me. She shamed me at times, uh, treated me poorly. We brought Rick in, my husband, and it was definitely, the dynamic was set up that yes, our family was a mess, and yes, it was all my fault. It's a disgusting abuse of a power dynamic on her part. And then when she was seeing Rick and her without me, on days when he would go without me, she wanted to hold him. She wanted to hug him and hold him. Come to find out, she married one of her patients, the doctor that I was seeing, that he was one of her patients at one time. And I think I knew about that before I went into it, but I didn't know. I was very I was very vulnerable at that time, and I needed something different than what I got. It was the moment that shook me so much that I have not gone back to alcohol since. I started seeing a life coach here, and she's been a real gift to me, my friend Kat. Uh, I've made some really great friends. I started women's circles here, trying to heal that mother wound. I've worked really hard. I did a lot of it on my own there for a little while too, because I was terrified. I stopped seeing. Rick finally said, "We're not going back to that therapist." He said, "I'm not going. You can keep going, but this is bullshit. She's nuts." And she was. She ended up packed up, moved to Michigan, or moved to Florida. I pray for her husband. She had her husband, who she got through manipulating, probably somehow. He was her patient. That's abuse right there, abuse of her power. You do not, even if you, so here's some things to look out for, because I definitely wanted to use this platform to say this, and I hope this helps somebody. If your therapist, if you know that they have married a patient, or in relationship with a patient, past patient, doesn't matter, get out. Don't go in there. Do not. Run away. Because even if I understand this now, a therapist has a patient, even if you haven't seen this patient in 15 years, you do not engage. You made an oath. It is part of your your education that you learn when you go to school to become a therapist. You do not become involved with any of your patients, period, throughout your entire life. Period. So the way I understand it now is that this woman was probably pretty sick. She married one of her patients, and because Rick's a hot guy. Well, no, Rick is he's a good-looking man. He has an incredibly great career. He does very well. He takes care of the family. He makes really good money. She probably was like very attracted to him. I mean, why not? Don't tell him. I'm kidding. I joke with my husband. I love him very, very, very much. He's a saint. um, but yes, so this woman probably had it in her back pocket. Like, if something doesn't work out with my marriage right now with this guy, because she'd been married before. She'd been married before, which is fine. Divorce is fine. I'm not judging that. She'd been married before. My look was like, where'd this guy come from? How many other ones were there? She'd been married before, divorced, got married to her patient, my doctor, my family doctor, and the pattern of people like that that I understand through other therapists because I've unpacked this shit, still unpacking it. Uh, but that they keep somebody in the back pocket over here, so in case it doesn't work out with the husband that they have now, they have somebody else that they can fall back on. And I think she was priming Rick to be that person to fall back on. And I tell you what, that it was definitely shoving me under the bus. I was a problem. I was to blame. And what that did to me was I can't even describe it. It took me a couple years to really talk about it with any other therapist. I'm lucky that I went back to therapy. I ended up going back to therapy. I found a guy who was an incredible therapist. He was really sweet, and I didn't talk about it. I was scared, and he knew. I know that he knew, and he was so patient and waiting. He was a very wise man. He was probably 70 and just patient with me. He knew how much I was hurting, how much I was in pain, and I love him so much. I miss him dearly. I had to quit seeing him because our insurance changed, and he was so good to me. And then I've had 2 other therapists since then. Both of them have been great. I will share to you that if you go into therapy, do your homework. Find out what fits right for you. This is the only way that I share my story so that if somebody else has been through something similar like this, you're not alone and you're not crazy. I thought I was crazy for years. It really fucked me up. I I think it I know it fucked up my kids. It fucked up Rick because then I was so tired of being blamed that I just blamed him. Um, and I went back and forth with blaming him, knowing that that wasn't the right thing to do. And then it was like I was just so stuck in my head. I was terrified, terrified. It has taken me finally. So this was 6 years ago. I saw this woman. 2 years ago, I finally started talking about it. So for about 4 years, I lived with this shit in my head. I have so much love and compassion for me. And when I went through with that, it was awful. It was awful. If you've been through something like that, you're not alone. Reach out, share your story if you want to. Share it with somebody safe. It's okay. There are not every therapist out there is a good therapist. Not every therapist out there is a good therapist. Do your homework. There are warning signs to look for. You can get online, you can search the web for how to find a good therapist. If anything, it's what feels good for you. Where do you feel safe? In my vulnerable moment, I wasn't even asking myself those questions. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And I just went in per my doctor saying, go to my wife. I was like, okay, yes, I'll take anything. I'll do anything. I trusted him. I trusted him. I still trust him. I don't trust her. I pray for him. But there are signs. And so get online and look. You can search the web. There's so many places to search to find tips on how to find a good therapist. Um, signs you might, I found this on the web, so I'm reading this off of my phone, but um, signs you might need a therapist. It might be time to find a therapist. You have confusion, you are uncertainty in yourself. That was me. Avoidance of people, places, and situations. That was me. Changes in eating and sleeping. Yep. Feeling overwhelmed. Yep. Agitated. Yep. Low mood. Yep. Hyper mood. Yep. Staying overly busy. I've never had trouble with that. I've always wanted staying overly busy. Why can't I feel busy? Because I have attention deficit disorder. That's why. Well, some people with attention deficit disorder can get incredibly busy. That's not how it presents for me. But so yeah, confused. These were all me. Oh, bless my heart. I still have it. They're still in there. They're still all in here. I just know how to look at them and soothe them and tell them that they belong and that they're loved and to just take a little nap. Just go over there and just take a little nap and cuddle you a little bit. Yeah, the confusion, uncertainty in yourself, avoidance of people, places, and situations, changes in eating and sleeping, feeling overwhelmed, agitated, low mood, hyper mood, staying overly busy. If you're feeling some of those things, go see a therapist. Good therapy has been incredible and it has changed my life, along with some 12-step programs and support. Great friends, friends I can be vulnerable with, friends that support, friends that I can be a support and let them be vulnerable with me, right? It's reciprocated. And it's an honor to be with people and just hold that space. There's a book called out there called Holding Space, and it's a great one. I don't know the name of it right now. It just came to my head, but there's good ways to be friends. What to look for in a therapist? Personally fit. This was one that was brought to my attention by a good friend of mine. She said, and she's a psychologist, and she said, you want to look for a therapist that's personally fit because if they're obese, they likely still have eating disorder issues and they are not healthy in their mind. They have not dealt with their ego. And you want somebody who's personally fit. Um, if they have their licensing and certification and education, um, specialty. What does I had to go through and find specialty. I was just finding a therapist at first and I was like, "Oh, there's a specialty." So I ended up with a therapist who didn't specialize in people with um substance abuse disorders and we were getting along, but it just wasn't gelling. So I switched. I wrote her a thank you note. You know, it's always good to have a good conscious ending to say because the therapist is they're a human being too. Like if you leave a therapist, I think I think it's important. It's respectful to say, "Hey, I'm leaving, and here's the reason why." Because the therapist is a human being too. If you leave and you don't say anything, it's like ghosting. Like, did I do something? Did I hurt them? Did I say something I shouldn't have said? You know, be respectful. Send them a thank you note, or just say, "Hey, I'm leaving. I'm done," or "Hey, I'm moving on." And so I sent my therapist a little note, said I'm moving on to somebody who specializes in substance abuse disorder. Blah blah blah. Anyway, also check the cost and the insurance coverage. Some places cover insurance, some places cover insurance and you don't have a copay. Some places do not cover your insurance and it can be pricey. Good therapy costs money. You get what you pay for. And then there's questions to ask before starting therapy. What are your fees? Do you accept my insurance? How or what do your credentials mean for me? Do you have experience working with people who have concerns like mine? Like for me, it would be substance abuse disorder, anxiety, depression, attention deficit disorder. How do you approach helping people? Do you make treatment plans? If so, will you share mine with me? And a therapist should always share everything with you if you ask. They should. How do the sessions work with you? How long is each appointment? What will we do? How long might I be working with you? How many sessions do people have with you? These are all good questions. And any question, honestly, check in with yourself. No question is a wrong question when it comes to your own self-care and to taking good care of yourself. We have a habit in our culture of being um, caretakers for other people, not taking care of ourselves. Um, so take care of yourself. Ask those questions that make you feel safe, that fit who you are. And if you don't know who you are yet, that's okay too. Uh, but finding a good fit for you. And I always say, trust your intuition. If I'd have trusted my intuition and my gut when I walked in that office of that woman, I would have walked out. Because when I walked in, my gut didn't feel right. But I was so disconnected from that part of myself at the time that I wasn't listening to it. And and that's a it's an important part of living. Trust your gut. Just listen to it. Your gut is in there saying, "Don't go in there, bitch. Run away." I should have listened to her. Oh, my gut was like, "Girl, this is not." And for like a year, kept going back, and each time I left feeling awful. And if you leave your therapist office, you should be feeling pretty good each time you leave your therapist office. Each time I left those sessions, I felt worse. I felt worse about myself. I felt like a piece of shit. And if you're leaving a therapist office feeling like a piece of shit, address it or run away and go find somebody different. You have to take care of you. Trust that gut. Trust your gut intuition. It's usually never wrong. You know, I should have ran out of that room. I should have ran out of that room. Um, and I am not going to be embarrassed about it. I'm not the only one. Anyway, I am going to say goodbye. I love all of you. I hope that this session has been useful for anybody. Please leave comments, suggestions. If you have any suggestions about therapists, share your story about your own awakening. I would love to hear it. And other people need to know they're not alone and that they too have had the same experience or similar or that it's different. You know, we're all walking each other home, right? Oh, which way? Hey. I love that picture, Ram Dass. I'm like, where's my microphone? Listen, we're all walking each other home. Share your stories. It's good when we know we're not alone, and what we've been through, how we're feeling, what's going on in our lives. Um, it's important. Your story is important. Share it. And share, hey, today, have you thought about your own mortality and how is that affecting you in your day? I know for me, it always leads me to love. Go kiss my babies. Though I have a teenager now and she doesn't want to hug and kiss me, but she'll let me go like this in the air to her and blow her little kisses. You know what I mean? She just doesn't. And my big baby, she's grown and she's flown the nest, and I miss her to pieces. But she would let me hug and kiss all over her if she was here, and I would. I just kiss her. Um, but yeah, how is contemplating your own death helping you find a rich and juicy life, not a happy life, rich and juicy with growth, with freedom, with all those bits that make us human. Share it. I want to hear it. Share it. You don't even have to share it on this page. Do your own videos. Throw it out there. I want to see it. Send me the link to your own. I want to see it. Put it up there. Everybody needs to share their story. We all need to know. I love y'all. I'll be back in about a week or so. Whenever I'm just follow spirit. Whenever spirit says go do it, I go do it. When spirit says not today, I say, okay, I'm not going to do it today. Today was the day. I hope that this has been informational. Again, share your own stories of therapy, positive or negative, your own tips on how you find good therapists. Share your stories about awakenings. Share your stories about your grief, and share your stories about your own thoughts on mortality and how they affect your day. And I hope you have a rich and juicy life full of growth, full of togetherness, full of other people who walk you home, full of people who you want to walk home with. I love you. I love each and every one of you to bits and pieces. Have a lovely evening. Bye. I turn this off. I'll figure it out. Bye. And